All right, hey everybody, welcome back. I hope everybody had a good break. We're now going to be starting World War II with tonight's video. So over the course of the next 4 nights, you guys are going to watch some videos on World War II. So we're going to cover this real briefly. Tonight we're going to talk about the causes of World War II. Tomorrow night you're going to look at the actions. The following night Wednesday night we're going to talk about the Holocaust just a little bit. And then on Thursday we're going to talk about how the war ended. So anyway, here's what we're going to be looking at over the course of the next week. You're going to demonstrate knowledge of the worldwide impact of World War II. You're going to explain the causes, major events, and the major leaders. And there's a list of the major leaders. We've already talked about most of those guys, but we're going to be throwing some extra names in there as well. We're going to look at the Holocaust and other examples of genocide in the 20th century. And last but not leastly, we're going to take a look at what happened after the war, specifically the war crimes trials, and then later on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the causes of the Second World War. Now, we've already looked at Versailles to a great extent, and we talked about how the Treaty of Versailles led to the First World War, but let's talk about some others. Well, first of all, the Treaty of Versailles, again, was very harsh on the Germans. They forced the Germans to make really heavy reparation payments. They forced the Germans to take complete and total blame for the war, and that didn't work out real well. So it's partially in response to the Treaty of Versailles, what we saw was also a resurgence of nationalism, and this is the second cause of World War II. So just like it caused in World War I, we see a resurgence in pride in their nation. Germany specifically was really hurt, but also Japan. So Japan and Germany began to see this renewed sense of pride in their nation, pride in who they were, and they had leaders that exploited that. They say these bad people had treated us poorly, and we did not get what we were expecting, and we are superior to other people, and we deserve better, and we deserve more. So nationalism also played a role in the Second World War and leading to the Second World War as well. Well, as created by the Treaty of Versailles, the League of Nations was simply weak. All they could do to try to get people to do what they wanted was to file economic sanctions or place them under economic sanctions. And when a country's economy was already bad, the economic sanctions really didn't hurt them that much. Or if a leader felt that they, like Germany or like Italy, that they could succeed without even with the sanctions, they ignored them. And the issue there was not necessarily the economic sanctions themselves, but it was the fact that other countries simply ignored them. Germany ignored sanctions placed on Italy. Italy ignored sanctions placed on other countries as well. And so if you had enough buddies or enough partners that would ignore the sanctions, then they didn't really matter. Fourth cause of the Second World War was simply put, aggression. What we see are three countries here now beginning to become aggressive in their desire to gain land, again, just like in World War I, and no one willing to stop them in doing this. The first example of aggression, and really many people believe that the World War II began when Japan invaded Manchuria, which is a northern section of China, in 1931. Japan invaded Manchuria, that section of China, and decided to take over land. They needed land for expansion. They wanted to create more living space for their people, gain more natural resources, and so they went into Manchuria. Now, if you remember, in the early part of the 20th century, Japan also went into Korea and controlled them as well. Well, they took over Manchuria and treated the Manchurians, or the Chinese in Manchuria, pretty poorly as well. Well, in 1935, seeing that the international community played no role or did little to stop Japan in their invasion of Manchuria, the Italians invaded Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia was a country or an area that Italy had tried to colonize earlier. Well, in 1935, they went back into Ethiopia and they launched air attacks. They really sent their army full into Ethiopia, and they took control of Ethiopia as well. Italy faced some minor sanctions, from the world community and the League of Nations, but they had really little effect on them because Germany partnered with them and totally ignored them. Now, Germany took several major steps in their aggression, and they did three things that were specifically outlawed by the Treaty of Versailles, but the Allies were focusing on themselves. Britain especially was focusing on themselves and rebuilding their economy following the economic collapse in the 1930s. And so they really weren't worried about this. So they weren't as concerned, I'll say that. In 1935, Germany, under Hitler's leadership, began rearming. They began building up their military once again to its full strength of what it was prior to the First World War. Hitler said, the international community has no right to tell us how we should protect ourselves and how to limit our army. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to rearm ourselves. Well, in 1936, following year, seeing that the international community did nothing they remilitarized the Rhineland. Now, if you'll remember, the Rhineland is the area right next to France, and the Germans remilitarized that, sent their troops back into that area to occupy that area, and essentially telling France, get the crap out of our country. You're no longer in controlling this area, and we're putting troops back here. And last but not least, the last step of aggression immediately prior to the official beginning of World War II is what's called the Anschluss. The Anschluss means simply annexation, and what happened was Germany annexed Austria right here and parts of what are called the Sudetenland, which was Czechoslovakia. So in 1938, Germany, under Hitler's leadership, went and took over Austria. So Austria is erased from the map, and went in and took pieces of land from Czechoslovakia. And so what happened here was now everybody's like, holy crap. This guy Hitler is kind of serious about his different ideas about taking over Europe and getting living space for his people. So this might be a big deal. But the problem with this was isolationism and pacifism, or passivism, on the case of both the United States and Europe as a whole, really. The United States said, look, we're going to stay out of Europeans' affairs. We're going to follow the Monroe Doctrine. We're going to stick to our own guns. The U.S. was not real happy with the results from the First World War. Remember, we didn't sign the Treaty of Versailles. We never ratified it in our Senate, and so we stayed out. We said, we're going to let them do their own thing. Well, Europeans as a whole were so worried about another world war coming and another big war coming that they didn't attack either, and they didn't put any limits on Hitler when he began expanding his land. And so this desire for peace or pacifism really wound up leading to the Second World War, because it just got worse and worse. And the way I want you to think about it is, let's imagine a lion is chasing you. Okay, if you're running from a lion or a tiger, and you go into a grocery store, what's the first place you're going to go run to? You're probably going to run to the meat section. So you're going to grab all the meat and you're going to start chucking it at this lion. Now, the lion is going to be appeased by that, okay, because you're going to throw steaks and maybe some fish and maybe some chicken. You're going to throw that stuff at him. But what he really wants is your meat, and he's not going to stop. And he wants to eat you because you're a living human being, and you're his ultimate goal. Because you are going to taste better than this steak, this cold, dry cow that you're feeding him. Okay, and so he's actually going to want to come after you, your living, breathing human, and that's what he's going to want to go after. And that's the idea of appeasement. You're trying to make him happy and just kind of get him off of you. And so that's what Europeans were trying to do. Okay, but that didn't work out. Finally, what happened was Britain said, we've had enough. And so in Munich in 1938, they went to this city in southern Germany, and Neville Chamberlain, who was the prime minister of Britain at the time, got together with Hitler right there and Mussolini right there and the leader of France at the time. And they all got together and they said, okay, so what's going to happen here? And Neville Chamberlain said, you know what? I've got Hitler's word on a sheet of paper. We are going to have peace in our time. We're going to have peace in our time because Hitler said he's not going to take any more land. He's going to stop where he's at. And he's happy with what he's got. So those are the 5-6 things rather that caused World War II or led up to it. Failures of the Treaty of Versailles, specifically the reparation payment and war guilt clause. Nationalism, weakness of the League of Nations, aggression by who become the Axis powers, and then isolation of the U.S. and pacifism in Europe, really trying to appease Hitler and whatever he wanted. And remember, appeasement took place at the Munich conference in 1938 as led by Neville Chamberlain, who was the British prime minister, who said, we're going to have peace in our time. And that didn't work out so well for them. But we're going to find out more about that tomorrow.